In Hollywood, beauty is considered a powerful currency, yet history has recorded some truly paradoxical transactions. Why did goddesses adored by millions choose to bind themselves to men whom the public at the time deemed a total mismatch in appearance? Instead of a dashing leading man, we see Ava Gardner walking alongside a husband of modest stature but possessing a towering ego. Or the backstage whispers of an A-list starlet having a cocktail poured over her head by her partner in front of a crowd just to assert his dominance. Some accepted a marriage to an older, intellectual giant in search of mental validation, while others used matrimony as a smokescreen to hide the cracks that studios strictly forbade from coming to light. Is this the call of the heart, or a fierce survival strategy of beautiful women? Let's reopen the files of 15 starlets with the most controversial marriages in history to find the answer. If you are curious about the real secrets behind the glamour, hit subscribe to join me in uncovering the truth behind these 15 shocking marriages. Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller. When the hourglass settled for the shadow of a balding intellectual, in the summer of 1956, the world was shaken by a single black and white photograph. Marilyn Monroe, the planet's most alluring woman, smiling radiantly beside a gaunt man with thick glasses and a high balding forehead. The press at the time immediately churned out cynical headlines, "Now the brain has married the hourglass." The public simply could not grasp why a sex symbol capable of bringing the world's most powerful men to their knees would choose Arthur Miller, a playwright 11 years her senior, with the dry appearance of a small-town schoolteacher. Witnesses of their journey recall that Marilyn was then at the peak of her exhaustion with the dumb blonde stereotype. Scrap notes found years later revealed a burning desire to be loved for her mind, not her curves. Miller appeared as an intellectual saint, the only man who seemingly saw through her profound vulnerability. She worshipped him, even willing to abandon Hollywood's dazzling spotlight to retreat into the life of a quiet housewife, cooking and cleaning in the Connecticut countryside. However, that warm velvet curtain was soon torn apart. There are painful accounts of Marilyn stumbling upon Miller's diary, where he admitted to feeling disillusioned and ashamed by his wife's instability. The breaking point came with the film The Misfits, for which Miller wrote a screenplay that exposed her most private agonies on screen for the world to see. Marilyn was utterly devastated, realizing that the husband she admired most was using her pain as raw material for his art. Their 5-year marriage ended in bitterness, leaving a Marilyn more shattered than she had ever been before. Marilyn's story is a tragic low note, but the price of trading beauty for intellectual prestige is even more vivid in the life of the woman dubbed the most beautiful in the world, Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr and Jean Markey. The price of trading beauty for a ticket to the elite. In 1939, as Hedy Lamarr walked down the aisle with Jean Markey, all of Hollywood held its breath in disbelief. On one side was a woman whose face was so flawless that every feature was considered a standard for fine art. On the other was a screenwriter described by reporters as soft, with a weak chin, and the appearance of a dull office clerk. The disparity was so vast that whenever they appeared at parties, the whispers of "why her and that guy" drowned out the music. In reality, those close to Hedy knew she wasn't acting blindly. Behind the sublime exterior, Hedy was an inventor with a sharp mind who felt out of place among well-groomed leading men. Jean Markey, a Yale graduate with profound social connections, was exactly the passport Hedy needed. She yearned to escape the eye candy label and step into the world of culture and refinement that Markey possessed. Backstage stories tell of a Markey who was incredibly suave and intelligent, a man who could keep Hedy laughing for hours with intellectual tales. However, admiration for his prestige wasn't enough to sustain a marriage lacking emotional resonance. After barely a year, Hedy filed for divorce. The tabloids of the era mocked that the key world's most beautiful woman had finally realized a husband's intellectual aura couldn't compensate for the blandness of the actual relationship. Hetty moved on, continuing her quest for mental recognition through 5 more marriages. But few knew that with every failure she realized beauty is a currency that, if not spent in the right place, becomes a lifelong burden. And when speaking of rebellion against Hollywood's standard beauty, none can forget the saint Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman and Roberto Rossellini. The Saint's Flight and The Shock of a Nation. America in the late 1940s experienced a true psychological trauma when their purest saint, Ingrid Bergman, abruptly sent a love letter to Italian director Roberto Rossellini. People still recount the provocative content of that letter. She was willing to do anything, even be a mere extra, just to immerse herself in his artistic world. Instantly, Ingrid abandoned her brilliant career and cozy family in the U.S. to plunge into an affair regarded as a stain on cinematic history. Public outrage peaked when the first photos of the couple were released. People couldn't believe their eyes. Paired with a radiant, saintly Ingrid was Rossellini, a middle-aged man with the appearance of a starving artist, a balding head, a stout frame, and a style of dress so disheveled it was hard to believe. The U.S. Senate even held a session to denounce her, calling it unpardonable depravity. Witnesses from that time say Ingrid seemed enchanted by Rossellini's mind. She was tired of playing a hypocritical moral icon in Hollywood and found in him a raw, naked authenticity. An old friend of the director revealed that Ingrid was willing to live in dilapidated rooms in Italy, eating meager meals just to listen to the cinematic philosophies of the man she considered a genius. However, cruel reality soon crushed that illusion. The films they made together were disastrous failures, and Rossellini turned out to be a patriarchal and hot-tempered husband. After 7 turbulent years and 3 children, the marriage ended in silence. Ingrid returned to Hollywood with another Oscar, but the image of her chasing that unattractive director remains a painful testament to how a woman can trade the whole world just to be seen as a real human being. Ingrid fled her image to find the truth, but for Rita Hayworth, her husband's intellect was a weapon used to strip away her own beauty. Rita Hayworth and Orson Welles. When an eccentric genius tried to destroy his wife's beauty, "They go to bed with Gilda, but they wake up with me." This bitter quote from Rita Hayworth summarized the tragedy of her marriage to the Culden boy of theater Orson Welles. In 1943, news of this wedding left Hollywood gasping. On one side was the woman whose pinup photo was taped to every soldier's locker. On the other was Orson Welles, the eccentric genius who was beginning to show signs of obesity, always appearing disheveled with dark circles under his eyes from maddening ideas. There are haunting accounts from the set of The Lady from Shanghai about how Welles treated his wife. He forced Rita to chop off her legendary red hair, her trademark, and dye it blonde, just to serve his personal artistic vision. Witnesses believed Welles didn't love Rita. He loved the act of molding and erasing a beauty icon to suit his whims. It was a spiritual invasion, turning an A-list star into an artistic experiment. Friends of Rita say she was actually a shy soul who craved a simple home. But Welles was a narcissist who believed the world revolved around his intellect. At lavish parties, Rita was often seen standing alone in the crowd, while Welles was busy lecturing strangers on philosophy, completely abandoning the glowing wife at his side. The marriage lasted only 3 years, but left scars that never healed. Orson Welles may have been the smartest man Rita ever loved, but that intellect possessed a destructive power beyond measure. He shattered her confidence in her own beauty, leaving a Rita Hayworth bewildered and broken until the very end. When intellect is no longer a catalyst but becomes a tool of dominance, it ends a chapter of tears to open Group 2, where marriages were built on calculated power contracts. Ava Gardner and Mickey Rooney. When beauty looked up to the gremlin for power, it was like watching Beauty and the Leprechaun walk by. That was the gasp from an MGM employee upon first seeing Ava Gardner and Mickey Rooney together. The contrast was a visual shock. On one side was Ava with her radiant wild beauty and statuesque height. On the other was Mickey Rooney, a man who only reached her shoulder with a face mocked for refusing to grow up. But behind this ironic physical disparity lay a calculated reality. At the time, Ava was just a newcomer with zero fame, while Rooney was the studio's #1 box office draw. Backstage reporters recall that marrying Rooney was like a guaranteed ticket for Ava's career in the cutthroat movie capital. She needed the patronage of a studio king, even if that king had the stature of a dwarf. However, their shared life turned out to be a nightmare. Those close to them revealed that Rooney possessed a massive ego to compensate for his lack of height. He was a notorious womanizer. In her memoirs, Ava bitterly wrote about being left at home while her husband went out seeking pleasures immediately after their wedding. The marriage lasted a mere 16 months, leaving a costly lesson: a husband's power and fame can never fill the void of a relationship lacking respect. Ava left, leaving behind her unattractive husband to go through 7 more marriages while she began her journey toward becoming a legend in her own right. The shadow of studio power did not just loom over Ava Gardner. It also led to one of the most mysterious deaths in history for the executive husband of platinum blonde sex symbol Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow and Paul Byrne. A bizarre marriage contract ending with a gunshot. All of Hollywood held its breath when Jean Harlow announced her marriage to Paul Byrne, an MGM executive. The public could not grasp why a radiant, vibrant 21-year-old would choose a 42-year-old man who was balding, physically frail, and described as having a lifeless face. It was called a bizarre union, a setup fueled by calculation rather than true love. Historians believe this was a beard marriage. Leaks from the studio suggested that Paul Byrne was a sophisticated man but faced private, physiological issues. Conversely, Jean Harlow needed solid patronage to control the scandals swamping her career. They came together like two pieces of a contract designed to protect their images. But tragedy struck just 2 months after the wedding. Paul Byrne was found dead in their home with a gunshot wound to the head and a strange suicide note mentioning impotence. Witnesses at the scene recalled that studio fixers arrived before the police to destroy evidence that might harm Harlow's image. The death of the unattractive husband left a permanent stain on the young actress's life, leaving the public forever questioning the brutal truth behind Tinseltown's arranged marriages. If Jean Harlow was a victim of dark arrangements' first lady, Norma Shearer was a woman who proactively used her beauty to build an empire alongside her frail husband. Norma Shearer and Irving Thalberg. When beauty served as the facade for a sickly mind, the queen of MGM, Norma Shearer, possessed a flawless beauty, yet her choice of partner raised many eyebrows. Her husband, Irving Thalberg, was dubbed the boy wonder of film production, but physically he was a gaunt, pale man who always carried the weary look of a chronic heart patient. Standing together, the contrast was stark, vibrant vitality on one side, fragile frailty on the other. MGM staff at the time recalled this as the most strategically perfect marriage. Norma didn't need a leading man to beautify the frame. She needed a mind that could mold her into the biggest star. Irving, despite his weak constitution, held absolute power over scripts and camera angles. A former collaborator revealed that whenever Norma was on screen, Irving supervised every detail to ensure his wife appeared perfect. It was a combination of a magnificent facade and an intellectual core. Norma cared for Irving like a devoted nurse, while Irving used his power to protect her throne. When Irving died at 37, Norma was utterly devastated. She realized that without that brilliant but frail mind, her aura would slowly fade. Their marriage proved that in the world of cinema, power can create an attraction that far surpasses any standard of muscle or glamour. Studio power can create fame, but to hold on to finances and independence, silent film queen Gloria Swanson made a much colder exchange. Gloria Swanson and Herbert K. Somborn. Cold calculation behind the accountant face. Gloria Swanson, the biggest star of the silent era, always appeared in lavish costumes with the aura of a queen. Yet her second husband, Herbert K. Somborn, was a major disappointment to fans craving romance. Somborn was 15 years her senior, stout balding, and mocked by one journalist as looking like an accountant with a stomachache. According to records of Swanson's relationships, she was an extremely ambitious and practical woman. Somborn wasn't a leading man, but he was a studio president and later the founder of a famous restaurant chain. Those close to Swanson revealed she married Somborn because he provided the financial security and business connections she needed to maintain her extravagant lifestyle. However, this pragmatism led to a turbulent split. Somborn was not only unattractive, but was also accused of being a philanderer. He even retaliated against Swanson by accusing her of adultery with 13 different men during their divorce suit. The marriage ended in cold estrangement, showing that when beauty is traded for money and power too coldly, the end is often betrayal. Swanson moved through many more husbands, but Somborn's name remains a testament to the calculated mismatch of a star who never let emotion overrule logic. As the games of power and money reached their end, some stars chose to flee the spotlight, seeking incredibly ordinary havens to heal their souls. Elizabeth Taylor and Larry Fortensky. The ultimate paradox, from diamonds to a dusty construction worker. The world experienced a true trauma in October 1991 when Elizabeth Taylor, the woman famed for her legendary violet eyes and the world's most massive diamond collection, announced her 8th marriage. This time the groom wasn't a powerful statesman or a famous actor, but Larry Fortensky, a construction worker 20 years her junior. Images of the wedding at the Neverland Ranch showed a surreal contrast: the magnificent Liz Taylor in a Valentino gown standing next to a man with an outdated mullet and the rugged look of a blue-collar laborer. Those close to her recall that Liz met Larry at the Betty Ford Center. While the rest of the world knelt at the feet of the Queen of Hollywood, Larry was the only one who didn't know or didn't care who she was. Liz's friends revealed she was exhausted by glamorous but dramatic affairs with Richard Burton or politicians who saw her as a trophy. Larry brought a completely different way of life, raw, honest, and devoid of the scent of money or fame. However, the gap in class and lifestyle soon showed cracks. Witnesses recalled that Larry looked like a deer in the headlights before the paparazzi and the lavish parties Liz attended. Though Liz tried to adapt by eating burgers and watching football with him, the cultural divide was too vast and they parted ways after 5 years. This marriage ended amicably, but it remains a testament to the final escape of a beauty icon who craved sincerity behind the dust of a construction site rather than the cold glitter of gemstones. Liz Taylor's quest for peace had a romantic hue, but for Claudette Colbert, choosing an anonymous husband was a calculated strategy for self-preservation. Claudette Colbert and Joel Pressman, a world apart, strategy beside an anonymous husband. Claudette Colbert was a titan of the 1930s, legendary for a perfectionism so relentless she reportedly only permitted filming from her left profile. Yet in stark contrast to her meticulous on-screen persona, her real-life marriage to Dr. Joel Pressman was a study in simplicity. Joel possessed none of the magnetism of a leading man. He was balding, stout, and carried the face of an ordinary middle-class intellectual who could effortlessly vanish into any crowd. Hollywood contemporaries recalled their bewilderment at seeing Claudette depart a lavish movie set to return home to a man entirely alien to the world of glitz. Joel never graced red carpets or decadent parties. He maintained his practice as a throat specialist at UCLA, a career Claudette respected without compromise. Close friends revealed this was a calculated arrangement. She craved a husband who didn't know how to act, a man who saw the wife not the Oscar-winning star. This profound mismatch in appearance and fame was in fact the secret to their 33 years of happiness. Biographers believe Colbert was astute enough to realize that in Hollywood, two stars under one roof often invite mutual destruction. She chose an unattractive man with a rock-solid career of his own to serve as a sanctuary for her soul. When Joel passed Claudette, never remarried, clutching the memory of that ordinary man as a treasure more precious than any fame could buy. But not everyone was lucky enough to find such a peaceful sanctuary as Claudette. For Bette Davis, a desperate longing for a traditional family drove her into the arms of a brutish boxer, leading to an agonizing tragedy. Bette Davis and William Grant. Sherry, when the Iron Lady mistook rudeness for ruggedness. In 1945, Bette Davis, the owner of the most expressive eyes and the fiercest temperament in cinematic history, stunned the public by marrying William Grant Sherry. Sherry was an obscure boxer and artist, a man of coarse features and a rugged, unrefined look. Many remarked that Sherry resembled a hired thug more than the spouse of an A-list icon, and his physical state deteriorated rapidly under the weight of chronic alcoholism. Those close to Davis revealed she was lured by Sherry's rough-hewn, dusty exterior, a trait she mistook for true masculine strength after tiring of polished, hollow actors. Betty lingered for a traditional home where she could shed her Iron Lady mantle to simply be a wife and mother. Reality, however, was far more savage. Sherry was not only unattractive, but plagued by a deep-seated inferiority complex, which manifested as a pathological jealousy of his wife's success. Horrific accounts tell of Sherry frequently berating Bette in front of friends and staff. He envied her spotlight so intensely that he sought to humiliate and control her through physical intimidation. This 5-year marriage was a corridor of dark days where Bette's beauty and talent were trampled by a man who could not endure living in her shadow. Ending in a bitter divorce, Bette realized the ruggedness she once worshipped was merely a mask for a petty, violent soul. Bette Davis's pain was the disillusionment of a masculine ideal, but for Barbara Stanwyck, her marriage to the bloated Frank Fay was a living hell on earth. Barbara Stanwyck and Frank Fay, when the wife's beauty became a thorn for a drunken husband. Before becoming an icon of fierce feminist roles, Barbara Stanwyck endured a nightmarish marriage to Frank Fay, a comedian on the steep decline of his career. When they wed, their physical disparity was the talk of the town. Barbara was young, sharp, and vibrant, while Fay was already showing signs of decay with thinning hair and a face bloated and flushed deep red from heavy drinking. Observers described Fay as looking like a disheveled drunkard rather than the husband of a rising star. Witnesses at Hollywood galas often recounted chilling tales of Fay's treatment of his wife. As Barbara's career soared, Fay sank into a pit of resentment. On multiple occasions in the heart of a glamorous crowd, Fay would unhesitatingly douse Barbara with a glass of liquor or strike her for an imagined slight. An old friend revealed that Fay frequently used violence to vent the shame of being mocked as Mr. Barbara Stanwyck. So Fay's ugliness lay not just in his haggard features, but in a character corrupted by alcohol and ego. This marriage became the bitter real-life blueprint for the film A Star is Born. Barbara endured this hell for 7 years, attempting to redeem her alcoholic husband, only to reap betrayal and agony. When she finally summoned the courage to walk away, she carried spiritual scars so deep she would never truly trust in marriage again. From the tragedies of fleeing the spotlight, we move to the final group where marital choices not only mismatched in appearance, but directly challenged every moral standard and social prejudice of the era. Tallulah Bankhead and John Emery. The Smokescreen: Marriage of a Wild Woman. Tallulah Bankhead was a name that made both Hollywood and the political world tremble due to her madness-inducing free lifestyle, her signature husky voice, and her shocking public statements about her sexuality. Yet in 1937, this untamable woman stunned the public by announcing her marriage to John Emery. Emery was an actor with a dignified, stiff appearance, a balding forehead, and the aura of an outdated gentleman, the polar opposite of Tallulah's flamboyant and liberated energy. Entertainment insiders at the time were deeply skeptical of the true motive behind this union. Backstage reporters recounted that Tallulah needed a legal smokescreen to mask her bisexual lifestyle and the all-night parties that were drawing unwanted scrutiny from the authorities. A close friend of Tallulah once revealed her famous quip regarding the marriage: "Marriage is one thing, pleasure is another." Emery, with his mild and bland exterior, was the perfect choice for her to maintain a standard public image. In reality, their lives functioned like two parallel lines. Witnesses at their private residence recalled that the couple maintained separate bedrooms and entirely independent lifestyles from the very beginning. Emery resembled a butler or an uncle to Tallulah more than a husband. After 4 years of acting the part of a happy couple, they divorced amicably. Tallulah returned to her life of unfettered freedom, leaving behind a bitter remark that marriage was merely a career for women who had no talent for anything else. Tallulah's calculation was one of survival, but for Greer Garson, her mismatched marriage was a slap in the face to the strict moral codes of America at the time. Greer Garson and Richard Ney, the mother-son scandal and a baffling mismatch. Greer Garson was beloved across America as the elegant, sophisticated national mother from the classic film Mrs. Miniver. But that aura was severely shaken when she announced her marriage to Richard Ney, the actor who played her son in that very movie. Not only was the 12-year age gap shocking, but the visual disparity between a radiant high society queen and a young man who appeared somewhat immature, gangly, and plain sparked a wave of intense public mockery. MGM studio staff recalled that mogul Louis B. Mayer furiously hauled Garson into his office and shouted, "You are the mother of America, you cannot marry your son." Nevertheless, Greer remained adamant in her choice. Witnesses described Richard Ney as looking like a schoolboy trying to puff himself up to stand beside a goddess. This mismatch lay not just in their faces, but in their stature. One possessed the ironclad confidence of an A-list titan, while the other carried the awkwardness of a newcomer living in the shadow of his wife. The relationship soon became a burden for both. Reporters claimed that Richard Ney felt humiliated by constantly being referred to as Mr. Greer Garson. The husband's insecurity, compounded by immense public pressure, caused the marriage to collapse after just 4 years. Greer Garson eventually found true happiness with an oil tycoon who matched her social standing, but the key mother-son affair with a plain younger husband remains one of the most baffling chapters in her career. Finally, we come to Lana Turner, who proved that sometimes a handsome leading man exterior can hide the ugliest and most sinful soul of all. Lana Turner and Lex Barker, when the Tarzan exterior masked a demonic soul. Unlike the other pairs referenced, the fourth husband of Lana Turner, Lex Barker, was widely admired for his striking appearance. Best known for playing Tarzan, Barker had a muscular build and sharply defined features that made him a Hollywood heartthrob. When they married in 1953, the press praised them as one of the most stunning couples in the film industry. Yet in later years it became evident that behind his seemingly heroic image was a deeply troubling reality that no physical attractiveness could offset. Lana Turner's story closes this list as a stark warning. In the glitzy world of Hollywood, a husband who is plain in appearance may bring peace, but a husband with the face of an angel can sometimes be the one who brings the darkest of tragedies. 15 marriages. 15 choices filled with paradox. We realize that behind the spotlight, beauty is but a fragile shell. Sometimes the mismatches we see are actually the ways in which the world's most beautiful women strive to find truth power, or simply a spark of sincere warmth amidst a cinematic capital rife with deception. If you found these secrets behind the glamour-intriguing hit, subscribe to join me in uncovering the truth behind the next shocking marriages.